I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry at first. What I felt was something worse, clarity. If that reaction doesn't make sense to you yet, stay with me. Because by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why silence was the loudest thing in that house that night. Let me ask you something before I go any further. Have you ever imagined how you'd react if your entire life cracked open in one moment, and then realized your reaction was nothing like you expected? Not dramatic, not explosive, just still. That's where this story really begins. My name is Matthew Carter. At the time this happened, I was 28 years old, married, employed, stable, at least on paper. The kind of guy people described as lucky, without knowing much else. And on the day everything fell apart, I was supposed to be on a plane. That part matters more than you might think. I had packed the night before, rolled my shirts instead of folding them, like my wife liked, set my alarm early, kissed her forehead while she slept and whispered that I'd see her in 3 days. A routine goodbye. Safe. Predictable. The kind of goodbye you don't remember later, unless it turns out to be the last honest one. The flight was delayed first, then canceled. Weather, they said. No reroute until the next morning. I stood there in the terminal for a while, watching people argue with gate agents, watching couples fight quietly, watching strangers sit alone with their thoughts. I didn't call my wife right away. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to surprise her. Maybe I just wanted to avoid the disappointment in her voice when I told her plans had changed. I took a cab home instead. It was late afternoon by the time I pulled onto our street. Same row of houses. Same quiet. Nothing felt wrong yet. No alarms in my head. No cinematic dread. Just a normal day rearranging itself. I paid the driver. Walked up the driveway. Noticed her car was home, which made me smile. She'd taken the day off, I thought. Maybe she'd order takeout. Maybe we'd watch something dumb and laugh about how bad airline food had gotten. All those small, unremarkable thoughts you have right before they become impossible. I unlocked the front door quietly, not on purpose. The lock had always been stiff, and I'd learned how to turn it just right so it wouldn't click. The house was dim, curtains half-drawn. The air smelled faintly like the candle she liked to burn in the evenings. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. That's when I heard voices. Not loud, not panicked, comfortable voices. Upstairs. I stood there longer than I should have. My suitcase still in my hand. My jacket still on. There was laughter. The kind that doesn't belong to phone calls. The kind that assumes privacy. And here's the part people expect me to say differently. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. What I felt was recognition. Not understanding, recognition. Like my body had reached a conclusion before my mind caught up. Like some part of me had been preparing for this moment without my permission. I started up the stairs slowly. Each step deliberate. The carpet muffled my footsteps. Their voices grew clearer. A man's voice. Familiar enough to unsettle me, unfamiliar enough to deny. At least for a few more seconds. I stopped just short of the landing. And in that pause, that single breath of time, I realized something important. Whatever I was about to see was going to divide my life into 2 clean halves, before and after. I'm not telling you this story because I handled it perfectly. I didn't. I'm not telling it because I'm proud of every decision that came next. I'm telling it because what happened in that house taught me something brutal and necessary about trust, about self-respect, and about the quiet strength it takes to walk away without losing yourself. If you're still here, thank you. Now let me take you back to what I thought my life was before I climbed the rest of those stairs. Before that afternoon, my life felt settled. Not exciting in a movie trailer way, but solid. Predictable in the way that lets you sleep at night. I had built something I believed in, and more importantly, I believed in the person I'd built it with. My wife and I had been together since our early 20s. We met before careers hardened us, before opinions calcified. We grew up side by side, first crappy apartments, then slightly better ones, then finally the house. That house. 2 floors, beige carpet we kept meaning to replace, and a staircase that always creaked on the 3rd step if you didn't know how to avoid it. We had rhythms. Sunday mornings were slow, coffee first, phones later. We argued about small things, dishes, whose turn it was to buy groceries, whether the thermostat needed to be touched at all. The kind of arguments that end in silence, not slammed doors. The kind you think mean you're doing okay. I worked in a field that required travel now and then. Nothing glamorous. Just enough to be inconvenient. She worked locally, stable hours, predictable stress. We'd joke that my job paid for the house, and hers paid for the peace. It was an easy narrative to believe. Looking back, I realize how much comfort comes from believing a story about your life. Not facts, stories. The version where loyalty is assumed. Where love doesn't need proof because it's always been there. Where trust is invisible because it's never been tested. I trusted her completely. And I don't mean blindly. I mean deliberately. I had chosen her, and every day I woke up and acted like that choice was permanent. I never checked her phone. Never asked who she was texting. Never wondered why she stayed late or came home early. I thought suspicion was something weak people carried. I thought confidence meant certainty. At home, she was warm. Attentive. She remembered small things. How I liked my eggs, which shirt I hated wearing, when I'd had a rough day even if I didn't say it out loud. She touched my arm when she laughed. She looked me in the eye when we talked. Those details mattered to me. They felt like proof. The house reflected that belief. Photos on the walls. Joint decisions on furniture. A spare bedroom we joked about turning into a nursery someday. Not yet, but someday. We said that word a lot. Someday. It made everything feel like it was moving forward, even when we were standing still. If you had asked me then whether my marriage was perfect, I would have said no. But I would have told you it was honest. And that's the part one was most wrong about. The warning signs weren't dramatic. That's important. There was no sudden coldness. No constant fighting. No obvious distance. Just small moments that didn't quite line up. Moments I filed away instead of examining. She started guarding her phone more carefully. Not hiding it, just turning it face down. She laughed at messages she didn't share. She became more particular about her appearance on days I traveled. New clothes. A different perfume. When I noticed, she smiled and said she was just feeling better about herself lately. I remember nodding. Encouraging it, even. I wanted to be the kind of husband who supported growth, not questioned it. One night, a week before that canceled flight, I asked her casually what she planned to do while I was gone. She hesitated, not long, just enough. Then she said she might have a friend over. Someone from work. I didn't ask who. I didn't ask why. I kissed her cheek and told her to enjoy the quiet. That hesitation stayed with me longer than it should have. Like a note played slightly off key. Not wrong enough to stop the song, but wrong enough to notice if you're listening. And now let me ask you something before I go further. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was off, but you ignored it because you didn't want to believe it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. At the time, I told myself trust meant not circling those thoughts. Trust meant moving forward, not backward. So I did what I'd always done. I believed her. And for a little while longer, that belief felt like the safest place in the world. The first real crack didn't come from what I saw. It came from what didn't make sense. After I heard the voices upstairs, my mind started scrambling for harmless explanations. Family. A coworker. Someone stopping by unexpectedly. Those ideas came fast, faster than fear, because they were familiar. They were comfortable lies my brain offered to protect me. I stood there at the bottom of the stairs, listening. The man's voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Relaxed. Confident. Not the tone of someone visiting briefly or keeping things professional. There was laughter again, softer this time. Intimate in a way that's hard to explain unless you've heard it before. Still, I didn't move. That hesitation was the inciting moment. The second where instinct woke up and said, pay attention. I tried to place the voice. That bothered me more than anything. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't someone from her office that I'd never met. There was familiarity in the cadence, in the way he joked, in how she responded without thinking. Like this wasn't their first conversation. Or their 10th. My grip tightened around the suitcase handle. I remember noticing how stupid that detail felt. How out of place a packed bag looked inside my own house. Like I'd already become a guest without realizing it. I took one step up. The carpet absorbed the sound. I took another. And another. With every step, my thoughts narrowed. Not panicked, focused. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't heartbroken yet. I was collecting data. That surprised me later, how methodical I became in those moments. Like some switch had flipped from husband to observer. I reached the midpoint of the staircase and paused again. That's when I heard my name. Not spoken loudly. Not shouted. Just mentioned casually, like punctuation in a sentence that didn't include me anymore. Matthew's flight isn't back until tomorrow, she said. There was no tension in her voice. No guilt. Just certainty. That sentence did something to me. It confirmed two things at once. First, she believed I wasn't coming home. Second, she was comfortable enough with that belief to build plans around it. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Still, and this is important, I didn't rush upstairs. Part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to burst in and force clarity through confrontation. But another part of me, quieter and colder, told me to wait. To see. To know. Because once you confront something like this, you can't unknow it. You can't go back to doubt or denial. You either step forward fully or you stay in the dark. And I wasn't ready to commit to either yet. So I listened. Their conversation drifted. Normal things. Complaints about work. A joke about a neighbor. Small talk, the most unsettling kind. Because it meant this wasn't just about desire. It was about comfort. Routine. I realized then that whatever was happening between them had been happening long enough to feel ordinary. That realization hurt more than anything else so far. I moved again, slowly. My heart started to beat harder now, not from fear, but from anticipation. Like my body knew a line was approaching and was bracing itself. At the top of the stairs, the hallway light was on. Their bedroom door, our bedroom door, was partially closed. Not enough to hide anything. Just enough to suggest privacy. I stopped outside it. And for the first time since I walked in, doubt crept back in. Not about what I was hearing, about what I should do next. Because once I opened that door, I wouldn't just be discovering something. I'd be choosing a future. I thought about calling her name, about announcing myself, about giving her a chance to explain before I saw anything that couldn't be softened with words. I didn't. I reached for the doorframe instead and leaned there, steadying myself. I wanted to be sure. Not emotionally, logically. I needed the truth to be undeniable. I needed it to stand on its own without interpretation. That's when the door shifted slightly, pushed from the inside by movement I couldn't see yet. And the last thread of doubt snapped. Pause for a second. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted her right then, or waited and watched? Drop your answer below. I really want to know. I pushed the door open. Not hard. Not dramatically. Just enough. The room didn't freeze the way movies make you think it will. Nothing stopped. Nothing paused. Life just kept going, like it didn't care that I was standing there watching it rearrange itself. They were on the bed. Not rushed. Not frantic. Comfortable. Familiar in the way that only comes from repetition. His jacket was on the chair. Her shoes were kicked off near the dresser. Details I never would have noticed before, but now they burned themselves into me. She looked up first. Her eyes widened, not in fear, not in panic, but in shock. Like a plan had misfired, not like a marriage had just ended. That distinction mattered more than I can explain. He turned next. And that's when recognition fully landed. I knew him. Not well. Not intimately. But enough. A friend of a friend. Someone I'd shaken hands with at barbecues. Someone who had sat on my couch once and complimented the house. Someone who had looked me in the eye and asked how work was going. The betrayal doubled in that second. It wasn't just what they were doing. It was who they were doing it with. No one spoke. I didn't shout. Didn't demand answers. Didn't even move further into the room. I just stood there, holding the door open, absorbing the scene like evidence. My mind went quiet. That's the part people don't believe when I tell them later. They expect rage. Tears. Collapse. But what I felt was something like gravity shifting. Like my internal compass had recalibrated instantly, and everything that mattered before had lost its pull. She said my name. Once. Softly. Carefully. Like volume could undo damage. I didn't answer. He started to say something. I don't even know what. But I raised my hand slightly, not aggressively. Just enough to stop him. He did. That surprised me. The power of silence, I guess. I looked at her then. Really looked. She wasn't crying. She wasn't scrambling for excuses. She was calculating. Measuring. Trying to understand how much I knew, how bad this was, and whether there was a version of this moment where she didn't lose everything. That realization hurt more than the act itself. Because it meant this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Repeated. Managed. Rationalized. I stepped back from the doorway. Slowly. Intentionally. Like I was returning something fragile to its place before letting it fall. The morning after didn't bring clarity. It brought stillness. I woke up in that hotel room before my alarm, sunlight cutting through the thin curtains, and for a split second, I forgot where I was. That reflexive moment of normalcy, reaching for my phone to check the time, thinking about coffee, lasted just long enough to hurt. Then it all came back. Not in a rush. In layers. I sat up on the edge of the bed and stayed there for a while, elbows on my knees, breathing slowly. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't spiraling. I was assessing. Like my mind had decided emotion could wait. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted control. I needed information before reaction. I needed the full shape of the truth, not just the part that happened to intersect with a canceled flight. I showered, dressed, checked out. The clerk smiled and asked how my stay was. I told her it was fine. That word, fine, felt flexible enough to hold a lie. Instead of going back home, I went to work. That probably sounds strange, but routine was grounding. Sitting at my desk, answering emails, pretending the world hadn't tilted. It gave me space to think without drowning. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. I wasn't ready to hear other people's opinions coloring my own. Throughout the day, my phone kept lighting up. Missed calls, texts, apologies layered on top of excuses. Some emotional, some logistical, all premature. I didn't respond. That silence wasn't passive. It was intentional. Every unanswered message gave me leverage. Time to decide what I wanted this to become. By lunchtime, I'd made a list. Not written down, just mentally. Things I needed to know. How long had this been going on? Who knew? How deeply had my life been rearranged without me noticing? I started small. I checked our shared accounts. Nothing obvious missing, but patterns emerged. Dinners I hadn't been to. Movie tickets I hadn't watched. Groceries that didn't align with my absences. Proof that this wasn't a single reckless decision. It was a parallel life. That realization didn't break me. It clarified things. That afternoon, I left work early and went back to the house, not to confront her, but to observe. Her car was gone. The house was empty. I walked through it slowly, like I was visiting someone else's home. The bedroom smelled different. Not bad, just unfamiliar. I opened drawers. Not to snoop, to understand. Receipts. Notes. A second phone charger tucked into the side of the bed that wasn't mine. Evidence without theatrics. Each discovery made something inside me go colder. Calmer. By the time she came home that evening, I was ready. We sat at the kitchen table. Not across from each other, side by side. That choice was deliberate too. I didn't want this to feel like a fight. I wanted it to feel final. She talked. A lot. She cried. Explained. Reframed. Told me it started as a friendship. That she hadn't meant to hurt me. That she felt lonely. That she still loved me. I listened. Not because I believed her, but because I wanted to hear how she justified it to herself. That told me more than the facts ever could. When she finished, I said one thing. I know more than you think. Her face changed then. Fear finally replaced strategy. I didn't tell her what I knew. I didn't need to. The uncertainty was enough. That was the moment the balance shifted. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was deciding. And here's where I want to ask you something. Here's where I made my choice. Do you believe in revenge or in walking away? When someone destroys your trust, what's the right move? Comment below. I want both sides. Because what I chose next wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. But it was deliberate. And once I committed to it, there was no going back. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I didn't negotiate. The next morning, I acted. I woke up before her. Packed a single bag, essentials only. Laptop. Documents. A few clothes. The things that mattered because they were mine. I left everything else exactly where it was. Not out of generosity. Out of precision. I wanted the absence to speak for itself. At work, I requested personal leave. No explanations. Just time. Then I made the calls I'd been putting off. A lawyer first, then the bank. Each conversation was clean. Efficient. Almost surgical. The language of separation has a way of stripping emotion out of everything it touches. By noon, I had opened a new account. Redirected my paycheck. Froze joint spending above a certain amount. Not to punish, to protect. Then I sent one message. I'm filing today. Nothing else. No blame. No commentary. Just fact. Her response came immediately. Calls. Texts. Voice messages stacked on top of each other. Urgency escalating with every unanswered attempt. I let them ring. All of them. Silence again, but this time, it wasn't about leverage. It was about boundaries. I went back to the house once more that afternoon, knowing she wouldn't be there. I needed one last thing. I walked into the living room and took down the photos. Not all of them. Just the ones that told a story that no longer existed. I placed them face down in a box and left it on the kitchen table. Then I wrote a note. One sentence. Please don't mistake my calm for confusion. I left the key on top of it. Driving away felt different this time. Lighter. Not because the pain was gone, it wasn't, but because the uncertainty was. I knew exactly where I stood now. And that clarity was powerful. The actual confrontation, the final one, happened days later in a lawyer's office. She looked smaller there. Not physically. Emotionally. The confidence was gone. The narrative had collapsed under its own weight. She tried once more to talk to me privately. Asked if we could just step outside for a minute. I said no. That answer was harder for her than anything else I'd done. Papers were signed. Terms were discussed. Words like irreconcilable and equitable distribution floated between us, detached from the human damage they represented. And then it was done. I stood up first. Didn't wait to see her reaction. Didn't look back. This is the moment everything changed. Be honest. Are you rooting for me right now, or do you think I went too far? Tell me in the comments. I can take it. That night, alone in a quiet apartment I'd rented short-term, I finally felt it. Not anger. Relief. Because justice doesn't always look like exposure or revenge. Sometimes it looks like refusing to participate in a lie one more day. And sometimes, the strongest move you can make is leaving without trying to be understood by the people who never tried to understand you. The weeks after were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, just empty. Like a house after furniture's been moved out, where the echoes surprise you more than the silence. I went through my days on autopilot at first. Work, gym, grocery store, sleep, repeat, structure without meaning. People asked questions I didn't know how to answer yet. How are you holding up? Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? Most of the time, I said I was fine. Not because I was lying, but because not falling apart felt like an achievement in itself. There's a strange pressure after something like this to perform grief a certain way. I didn't want an audience. I wanted stability. What I lost was obvious. A marriage. A home. The future I'd assumed was already underway. But what surprised me was what stayed. I still woke up early. Still liked my coffee strong. Still found comfort in routine. The core of me, the part that made decisions, that held values, hadn't been damaged. It had been tested. That distinction mattered. I moved into a small place on the other side of town. Nothing special. But it was mine. No shared memories baked into the walls. No echoes of conversations that never really happened. Just clean space. The first night there, I slept better than I had in months. I started seeing things more clearly then, not just about her, but about myself. How much of my identity had been wrapped up in being dependable, in being the one who didn't question, didn't doubt, didn't push too hard. I realized I'd confused trust with silence. That wasn't her fault alone. Healing didn't come in big revelations. It came in adjustments. Learning how to sit with discomfort without reaching for distraction. Letting myself feel anger without acting on it. Allowing sadness to exist without turning it into a story about failure. Occasionally, she reached out. Not to reconcile, to check in. To see how I was doing. The first time, it almost worked. Familiarity has a pull. But I didn't respond. And each time after that, it got easier. Boundaries, I learned, aren't walls. They're filters. They let the right things through and keep the rest from poisoning the system. I didn't rush into anything new. No rebounds. No dramatic transformations. I stayed present. Took a class I'd always put off. Reconnected with friends I hadn't leaned on enough. Listened more than I talked. One evening, months later, I ran into someone we both used to know. They hesitated before mentioning her name, then told me she'd moved. Started over somewhere else. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not resentment. Just distance. That's when I knew something had shifted. Looking back now, I wonder if I'd do it the same way again. What about you? Was the pain necessary to become who you are today? Let me know below. Because here's the truth they don't tell you about betrayal. It doesn't just reveal who hurt you. It reveals who you are when no one is watching. And the version of me that walked away quietly, without shouting, without spectacle, is someone I respect more than the man who trusted without question. That realization didn't erase the past, but it gave it meaning. I used to think strength was about endurance, about staying, about holding things together even when they started to hurt. I thought loyalty meant absorbing discomfort quietly, the way you absorb bad weather and wait for it to pass. I don't believe that anymore. What I learned is this. Strength is knowing when something no longer deserves your patience, when silence stops being noble and starts becoming self-betrayal. Walking away isn't failure if staying means shrinking. For a long time after everything ended, I replayed the moment on the stairs, the pause before the landing, the second where my life could still pretend to be intact. I used to wonder what would have happened if I'd turned around, if I'd gone back outside and waited, if I'd let denial buy me a little more time. But now I understand something clearly. That pause wasn't hesitation. It was permission. Permission to stop explaining. Permission to stop negotiating reality. Permission to choose myself without apology. Betrayal has a way of clarifying values. It strips away the illusion of control and shows you exactly where your limits are. Mine wasn't the cheating. It was the ease with which the truth had been hidden, the comfort of the lie. I didn't win anything in the traditional sense. There was no applause, no moment where the world told me I'd done the right thing. Just quiet mourning